Everything that the woke agenda touches inevitably fails. Marvel was in control of the cinematic empire just a few years ago. Now they're slowly becoming irrelevant. Flop after flop and a string of content almost designed to attack their fanbase has put a massive dent in their reputation. Snow White was another casualty, a sign that Disney's doubling down on their identity politics. When it does release, it will be just another failure to add to the pile. And they weren't alone. BuzzFeed, Vice, Gillette, a whole slew of companies have chained themselves to left-wing political agendas. But why? Is any publicity really good publicity, or is something deeper going on here? While pushing a political agenda alongside your product isn't a crazy step for these companies, it's not like people are resistant to politics in their media as a general rule, even if they aren't watching the news. The Barbie movie is all the proof you need.
Warner Brothers say it has now passed over $1 billion at the global box office.
It's closing in on the top 10 grossing movies of all time right now, partly off the back of its message. The problem comes when the wokeness and the political agenda starts to infringe on what people are really there for. Take Marvel films for example. It's like they saw the success of Black Panther and they've been trying to emulate it ever since. But what they don't understand is that a large part of what made it popular was that it's actually a good movie. It might not be for everyone, but among Marvel films in general, it's regarded as one of the better ones. Comparing it to some of the films they've been pushing out today, and the difference is night and day. Every scene that's trying to push a message rather than tell the story detracts from the entire movie. There's no effort or creativity in race-switching fictional characters, or making every female character hate men to make them look strong and empowered. It doesn't make people want to watch more or see what happens next. People know women are capable of being the hero. Films like Alien and Terminator series did it decades ago. It's nothing new or revolutionary. Marvel follows these repetitive and hollow patterns, pushing the same message over and over again, expecting to produce fresh results. Instead, they get some of their lowest grossing films of all time. When they do finally accept the reality, they start throwing the blame everywhere they can, except the actual problem. Recently, the Witcher producer blamed fans for the failure of the show, because according to him, people are simpletons for not understanding their show, which makes no sense as they completely changed the source material and the whole franchise is in jeopardy. They have no hope. Henry Cavill was the only thing keeping the show alive, and he's not going to be in season 4. And it's not just the film companies and Disney, of course. Tons of media giants have fallen into disarray after leaning too hard on going woke. BuzzFeed started as one of the first media companies that connected with the internet audience, and they used to dominate people's timelines and feeds. Their shows like Unsolved used to get millions of views daily, but as they grew and began to expand, everything else began to crumble. BuzzFeed started to become more political, not in a satirical or informative way, but to push a plastic agenda and divide people on the basis of any progressive thing they found. Their best weapon was to enforce guilt in men and white people. For example, there's a video by BuzzFeed called 36 Questions for Men, and the entire video is just filled with awful opinions and stereotypes, which is funny as they claim to go against the stereotypes. The video starts with their employee comparing every man to Donald Trump.
How does it feel to be the same sex as Donald Trump?
And there are countless videos like this, where rage bait generates millions of views. But after a short while, everything else becomes boring if someone doesn't evolve. BuzzFeed failed to see this and fix themselves, and now they're completely dead. People didn't watch BuzzFeed to feel bad about themselves, but to get entertained. And by forcing out and undervaluing what people actually wanted to see, they lost it all. But before we continue, I want to tell you about our sponsor, War Thunder. Dive into the world of War Thunder, where the battlefield comes alive in stunning 4K resolution. With its stunning graphics, you can feel the pulse of the game with its authentic sound effects and mesmerizing music that draws you into the heart of the action, where you can experience one of the most intricate vehicle damage systems in gaming. Forget generic hit points. Here, vehicles endure genuine damage to their components and crew, and you can witness the aftermath of the damage with a detailed damage X-ray system, revealing the true impact on you and your opponent's vehicles. And you don't even need any fancy gaming gear. You can command the skies with just your mouse and keyboard, thanks to the game's intuitive mouse aim mode, all while you can discover a vast collections of vehicles from every corner of the globe. I'm personally a huge fan of the British destroyer tank, but you don't have to follow my recommendation. War Thunder offers a plethora of choices to match your combat style, where you can prepare for adrenaline-fueled warfare in War Thunder, engaging in intense battles across expansive interactive terrains, commanding ground vehicles, aircrafts, helicopters, and naval vessels. As War Thunder is the most detailed vehicle combat game ever crafted, allowing you to play with over 2,000 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships in dynamic player versus player combat. And War Thunder is now available on PC, Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and previous console generations. offering a smooth cross-platform experience. Whether you crave high-speed action or strategic warfare, War Thunder has got you covered. So start playing War Thunder today and gain a bonus pack with the link in the description below, where you'll receive premium vehicles, 7 days of free premium access, 100,000 silver lions, 10 backups for each rented tank, and so much more. The bonus is also available on all platforms for new players and returning players who have been inactive for at least 6 months. So click on the link in the description below and join the battlefront today. However, possibly the saddest example of this is what we've seen with Vice. Classic Vice was doing things nobody else had the creativity, let alone the balls, to pull off. They were going straight into active war zones and interviewing anyone from drug dealers and dictators. Then they decided that people cared more about the culture war than actual wars. So they went from representing the new edgy wave of journalism straight to being out of touch, prioritizing fantasy over reality. Everything on top of that was unneeded mess that would end up putting the whole media company down. The corporate side of the company overtook everything else and smothered Vice's independence. In 6 years, they went from being worth $5.7 billion to bankruptcy. Now they're being bought out for a tiny fraction of that. Which all begs the question, why are so many companies falling into the same trap? They're not just stumbling into it suddenly either. The process takes years of poor reviews, an angry audience, and severe backlash. But they just double down, continually pushing out empty political content without any signs of stopping. A large part of this can be explained through how these companies change over time. Take Vice for instance. They began as independent filmmakers and journalists, pursuing stories they thought were relevant to their audience. Obviously it worked and they kept on expanding. At first this was great, more passionate filmmakers and artists joined their ranks and they kept on making quality content. But as they got larger and larger, more money got involved, and with it came investors and a more corporate structure and philosophy. Like every other large media company, it got taken over by the coastal intellectual elite. In 2019, around the same time as the beginning of the decline, they took a $250 million investment from George Soros and other political investors, where they started pushing their philosophy of political correctness, focusing more on the kinds of articles and videos than what got them there in the first place. Now they're on the way to being bought by the Saudis. It's a cruel twist of fate, seeing an independent journalism company go into bed with a regime that assassinates journalists. But with bankruptcy looming, they signed a $50 million deal to make content for Saudi TV. It's on top of the secret $20 million festival in the Arabian desert they ran, and reported censoring of things the Saudi government doesn't want its people to see. So they went from documenting dictators to actually getting funded by them. And if that isn't against the woke ideology, then nothing is really. It's not an ideology these coastal and corporate elites share with anyone else. Despite being some of the most powerful, privileged people on the planet, woke billionaires and elites have decided they're really the champions of the people they're exploiting. Real societal issues are used like armor to deflect against criticism. By co-opting and repurposing issues and causes, companies can get into the headlines and CEOs can score some points with their ideologue friends. It's an ideology that runs on awareness rather than action. The political equivalent of changing the background on your Facebook profile picture to show your support. What these companies fail to realize is that barely anyone cares more about gender politics than what they're actually there to see. No one in their right mind cares deeply about whether the host of Disney World says ladies and gentlemen or boys and girls. Sure, Disney might have gotten a few points with a specific niche of obsessive leftists, but these aren't new people with very long memories, brand loyalty, or any real reason to care about Disney at all. Their core audience of families and young children certainly don't. Nor do they care about the cutting commentary on patriarchal stereotypes that the new Snow White movie is going to blow everyone's minds with.
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
Other than a costly legal battle with Ron DeSantis, Disney isn't getting anything. For other companies that are selling products rather than entertainment, it's even worse. It's a complete mystery why Gillette thought they were both the authority on gender relations and that their core market wanted to be shamed and lectured by them.
We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy?
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says
And there will be no going back.
Consultants and focus groups deduce that people want stories and characters that they can relate to and that they can identify with. But what they fail to realize is that people don't identify with characters because they look like them. They want characters they can empathize with and understand. Nobody understands or feels any connection with these hollow plastic puppets they use to spread these bland ideas with. People are interested in the message, not the messenger. Companies that buy into the woke ideology slowly lose more of what made them successful. They carve off pieces of their identity to try and fit into the woke mold. Eventually you end up with a media company obsessed with articles about manspreading, or a film company throwing away its classic time-tested stories in favor of yet another strong female protagonist story. It's also a benefit to these companies as a cover for all the dirty stuff going on behind the scenes. The more noise a company is making about some unrelated social issue, the less people will look into their other business. Netflix tries to present itself as very friendly and woke, but under the surface, they're bleeding people dry. The South Korean Actor Association is accusing them of underpaying despite the massive pile of cash they made off of Squid Game. And so just like that, Disney can now claim that they're the good guys, but their actions are always the opposite again. Recently, they scanned the faces of background actors in WandaVision to use them for future projects without actually paying them. They want more people to scan their faces so that Disney can own their likeness forever. Basically, Disney and other large studios are trying to own people for their greedy intentions, and the whole woke image is just a mask so that they can present themselves as the good guys. One of their most egregious examples was with the filming of Mulan. Despite parading it in front of people as a shining example of inclusivity, reality was nothing like that. Instead, they traded an all-white cast for an ethnically hand cast instead, the exact audience the film is designed for. A story originally set near the Mongolian border is now full of people who are from thousands of miles away. And the worst part here is that they were filming in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, the same place as China's network of concentration camps and re-education centers. The credits of the movie even give thanks to the parts of the Chinese government directly responsible for overseeing the horrors that happened there.
Disney included special thanks to 8 government entities in Xinjiang, a province where rights groups have exposed a harsh crackdown against Uyghur and Kazakh Muslims, including mass internments, enforced sterilizations, and forced labor. It also acknowledged the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda department. The film Mulan is seen as part of an attempt by China to soften its image, and many journalists and activists are calling for its boycott.
At least the whole thing was a failure in the end. Despite all the pandering and focus grouping, the film got a frosty reception. 4.7 out of 10 was the average review score on Douban, a Chinese film reviewing site. The Chinese market is just too tempting for these companies though. Disney has far more allegiance to China than any of their other political crusades.
Bob Iger came to mind as I was reading the book, because he obviously at one point was going to be the U.S. or potential U.S. ambassador to China. He's now currently CEO of Disney again. I think Marvel movies start to stream in to China again now that he's back in that role.
I mean, I think there's no question that they have had the most success in China. I would argue, though, that success is more of a vulnerability today than ever, because when the geopolitical winds shift, Disney is caught in the middle.
The Chinese government own parts of their $5.5 billion Shanghai resort park, and the Chinese market is the only thing that saved some of their recent flops. It's hypocrisy, plain and simple, but it's an agenda that's been shamelessly pushed by investors and bankers alike. BlackRock was the company leading the charge. The $9 trillion asset manager has been playing the puppet master, strongly incentivizing companies to fit themselves into their ESG program. On the surface, the scheme promises to reward companies that reduce their emissions or crack down on harassment. In reality, the highest scores go to whichever company is making the biggest waves and playing into BlackRock's game of appearances. A higher score meant more investment and a spot in Larry Fink's good books. BlackRock says the ESG scheme and their related investments have lost them $4 billion. Not much compared to the $9 trillion they're in control of, but still a substantial amount. Their specifically environmental or socially conscious funds just didn't make any money. They probably lost a lot more than $4 billion in total, but it's not why BlackRock CEO Larry Fink has put an end to the whole thing. Despite trying to stay under the radar, people have caught on to their interference. Just a couple of years ago, pretty much nobody knew who they were. Now they're infamous, and ESG is a big part of that reason.
We say we have a commander-in-chief, but really the commander-in-chief is Larry Fink today. The guy running BlackRock is really the president of the United States.
Larry Fink recently said they're scaling back on ESG. What's more is that he said he's been ashamed of the letters he wrote about how ESGs are the future, and that while of course BlackRock still believes in the ESG manifesto, they won't be using the term anymore, and that they're closing nearly all funds associated with it.
Environmental social governance, or we call it ESG, the corporate movement to invest in companies that promote progressive policies on the environment and social issues, it may soon be coming to an end.
BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager,
maybe looking to put the investment movement behind them.
This doesn't mean that BlackRock is going to stop interfering with politics and how people do business, not for a second. What it does mean though is that it will use a different name for it and that they might have to take a step back from doing it in public. Of course the empty dialogue won't go anywhere, but it will mean even less now. But where BlackRock goes, the companies they own follow, which might trigger a large shift towards a less outwardly woke stance from companies in general. We've seen a similar move over at Disney with their treatment of the Snow White disaster. The whole theme played out just like The Little Mermaid, or Lightyear, or any of the most recent flops. The only difference has been the severity of the response.
This right here is the decline of Western culture summed up in a single image, and this movie is the literal personification of everything wrong with modern entertainment.
Quite rightly, Disney isn't messing with some new idea or some forgotten part of their history. Instead, they've gone straight for the crown jewel of their empire, destroying Snow White by turning it into yet another political agenda film that's tainting their all-time classic. Snow White was the movie that put Disney on the map. They were pretty much nothing before it, but more than that, it's an essential part of nearly everyone's childhood. And to see such a beautiful and heartfelt work of art being replaced by Snow White and the 7 diverse companions is honestly depressing. Not just for the people who grew up with the original though, but for the kids who will have these films as their childhood memories. If Disney has their way, then this You Go Girl template is what children are going to grow up with. It doesn't tell them anything about the world, in fact it lies to them. These woke stories always revolve around a protagonist that starts out perfect, and it's the world that has to change to accommodate them. Mulan's new protagonist had magical superpowers from the beginning, completely taking the steam out of the plot. Rey from Star Wars was apparently born as a Jedi Master, and easily defeated Kylo Ren, who's been training his entire life. Snow White's new journey will be about showing everyone else how perfect they are, and it will only end once everyone recognizes that she really is the best. Are these the morals and ideas we should be instilling in kids? That they only need to be their own perfect selves and the world will hand everything to them on a silver platter. By buying into this nonsense, these companies are dooming future generations even more than they already are. It's no surprise that Disney has recently made claims about walking back their political agenda. Their falling share prices, their crisis with streaming, and their box office flops have given them food for thought. In a recent interview, Disney CEO Bob Iger said that they were going to quiet the noise and focus on making entertainment, not issue-focused content.
Disney CEO Bob Iger is vowing to quiet the noise around the culture war that has pitted the company against political leaders.
As with everything companies say, you should believe it when you see it for yourself, because the reality is that Bob Iger is probably just as nervous that his grand plan hasn't worked out so well. He's going back on it because appealing to a loud minority of people obsessed with identity politics isn't a sound business strategy. They will tone down the propaganda and the agenda and try and push it a little less hard, but it will stick around. They might even completely back out of the Snow White movie, but other than that, we won't see much change. Iger himself is likely to be in hot water over all the scandals and the legal battles that plagued his return to the company. After he tried to retire just a few years ago, the move away from politics could just be a ploy to save his own skin, if they even follow through with to begin with. And a special thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Make sure to click the link in the description below to check them out today to receive some awesome bonuses such as boosters and premium vehicles. This ridiculous ideology that the corporate world is so in love with has proven time and time again to be poisonous to success. But if you can count on one thing, it's companies chasing revenue and a rising stock price. So recent history should be a good sign that we're nearing the end of this whole craze. But then again, if woke ideology has proven anything, it's that it's completely detached from reality. All that's left is to see what goes first, the companies themselves or their devotion to identity politics.